The Forgotten Solution. The meeting that almost never happened. Dr. Sarah Chen walked through the massive corridors of Peacekeeper Prime, the galaxy's only neutral space station. Her footsteps echoed against metal walls that had witnessed 3 centuries of failed peace talks. Today felt different, though she couldn't quite explain why. Perhaps it was the weight of the datapad in her hands, containing humanity's most ambitious project ever attempted. The station buzzed with activity as representatives from 14 different species prepared for what many believed would be the final peace conference. If this meeting failed, the galaxy would descend into the largest war in recorded history. Dr. Chen passed groups of aliens engaged in heated discussions. The Zephyrians, with their crystalline bodies that chimed when they moved, argued with the bear-like Ursani about territorial boundaries. The insectoid Matheri clicked their mandibles in frustration, while debating with the energy-based Lumari about resource allocation. Every species here had been fighting someone else for generations. The causes varied, but the result was always the same: destruction, death, and deeper hatred. Dr. Chen had spent the last 15 years studying these conflicts, searching for patterns that others had missed. What she found changed everything she thought she knew about war itself. The Council of Last Hope. The main conference hall was a marvel of engineering, designed to accommodate the diverse physiological needs of all galactic species. The chamber stretched upward like a cathedral, with specialized seating areas for beings who breathed different atmospheres, required different gravity levels, or existed in entirely different states of matter. Ambassador Thrak of the Dominion Alliance stood at the center podium, his 4 arms gesturing dramatically as he spoke. The reptilian warrior was nearly 12 feet tall, covered in scales that shifted from deep green to battle red when he was angry. Right now, those scales were definitely red. 300 years of talking. Thrak's voice boomed through the translation systems. 300 years of conferences, treaties, and broken promises. The time for words has ended. Only strength matters now. Only victory brings peace. Murmurs of agreement rippled through several delegations. The Ursani delegation roared their approval, while the mechanical Synthuri projected holographic displays of their latest weapon systems. Dr. Chen watched from the human section, which consisted of only 3 seats in a chamber designed for thousands. Humanity was still considered too new, too primitive to have much say in galactic affairs. Elder Voss, the ancient mediator from the Eternal Circle, raised one of his 6 arms for silence. The elderly being had witnessed every major conflict in recent galactic history. His species lived for millennia, serving as neutral arbitrators when possible. But even his vast experience seemed inadequate for the current crisis. Ambassador Thrak speaks from pain. Elder Voss said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. All species here have lost worlds, lost loved ones, lost hope. Perhaps he is right. Perhaps only war can end our suffering. Captain Rodriguez, sitting beside Dr. Chen, shifted uncomfortably. The decorated human military officer had seen enough war during Earth's own troubled history. His weathered face showed the strain of someone who understood the true cost of conflict. They're really going to do it, he whispered to Dr. Chen. They're going to tear the galaxy apart. Dr. Chen stood up slowly. Around the chamber, hundreds of alien eyes turned toward the small human section. Most expressions showed curiosity, a few showed annoyance, and several showed outright contempt. Humans had been part of the galactic community for only 50 years, barely a blink of an eye compared to civilizations that had existed for millennia. Elder Voss, Dr. Chen said. Her voice steadied despite the magnitude of the moment. Humanity requests permission to present an alternative to war. The chamber fell silent for a moment, then erupted in what could only be described as laughter, though it came in many different forms. The Zephyrians' chiming became musical with amusement. The Ursani produced deep, rumbling chuckles, and the Mantheri clicked their mandibles in rhythm. Even some of the energy beings flickered with colors associated with humor. Ambassador Thrak's scales shifted to an even deeper red. The children want to speak, he announced to the chamber. The species that has been in space for less time than most of us spend in adolescence believes they can solve what we could not in 3 centuries. The presentation that changed everything. Dr. Chen waited for the laughter to die down. She had expected this reaction. Humanity's youth in galactic terms was well known, and their lack of major military victories made them appear weak to species that had conquered solar systems. But Dr. Chen had learned something during her decades of research that no one else seemed to grasp. "You're right, Ambassador Thrak," she said calmly. "We are young. We've been studying galactic history for only 50 years, but sometimes fresh eyes see things that experience has trained others to ignore." She activated her data pad, and holographic displays filled the chamber. Star maps appeared, showing battle zones, trade routes, and population centers across the galaxy. But these weren't military tactical displays. They were something entirely different. Every species in this chamber evolved differently, Dr. Chen continued. You come from different worlds, with different histories, different challenges. But our research has revealed something remarkable. Despite all your differences, despite centuries of war, you all want exactly the same things. The holographic display shifted, showing psychological profiles of different species. Dr. Chen had spent years conducting secret interviews, analyzing behavior patterns, and studying the deepest motivations of galactic civilizations. "The Dominion Alliance fights for security," she said, looking directly at Ambassador Thrak. "Your species evolved on a world with many predators. Your entire culture is built around the need to be strong enough to protect your families." Ambassador Thrak's scales flickered, showing uncertainty for the first time. "The Zephyrians seek harmony," Dr. Chen continued, turning to the crystalline delegation. "Your musical culture values balance and coordination above all else. You fight only when that harmony is threatened." She moved through each species systematically, revealing insights that struck at the heart of their deepest beliefs and fears. The Ursani fought to preserve their ancient traditions. The Manthari battled to ensure the survival of their hive communities. The Lumari struggled to find meaning in a universe they saw as chaotic and purposeless. "Every war in galactic history," Dr. Chen said, "has been fought because one species couldn't understand what another species truly needed. You've been fighting symptoms, not causes." Elder Voss leaned forward in his floating chair. "This is fascinating research, Dr. Chen, but research does not stop plasma cannons or prevent planets from burning." Dr. Chen smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. "You're absolutely right, Elder Voss. That's why we didn't stop at research." The secret that humanity kept. Captain Rodriguez stood up beside Dr. Chen. Despite being military, he had a gentle demeanor that seemed at odds with his scarred hands and tired eyes. "For the past 20 years," he said, "while the galaxy prepared for war, humanity prepared for something else entirely." New holographic displays appeared, showing technical schematics that made several alien scientists lean forward with interest. The designs were unlike anything seen before, combining elements of neuroscience, quantum physics, and something that looked almost like art. "We call it the Neural Harmony Network," Dr. Chen explained. "It's based on a simple principle that we discovered in our own evolutionary history. Humans survived and thrived not because we were the strongest or the smartest, but because we learned to understand each other." Ambassador Thrak's voice was skeptical, but no longer mocking. "What exactly does this network do?" Dr. Chen's smile widened. "It allows any thinking being to experience the emotions and physical sensations of those around them. Not thoughts, not memories, but the fundamental feelings that drive all behavior." The chamber erupted in voices again, but this time they weren't laughing. Questions came in dozens of languages, translated rapidly by the station's systems. The concept was so alien to most species that they struggled to understand it. "Impossible," declared Commander Excel of the Syntheri Collective. "Mechanical beings cannot share organic emotions." "Actually," Dr. Chen said, pulling up more data, "our tests show that any form of consciousness can be connected through quantum neural resonance. The substrate doesn't matter, organic or synthetic. Elder Voss's ancient eyes showed interest for the first time in decades. You've tested this technology. Captain Rodriguez nodded. Extensively. On humans first, then on volunteers from 12 different species. The results were consistent every time. When beings truly understand what others are feeling, conflict becomes psychologically impossible. Dr. Chen activated a small device she had been carrying. Immediately, everyone in the chamber felt a wave of something. It was subtle at first, like hearing a distant song or smelling a familiar scent. Then it grew stronger. Ambassador Thrak's aggressive posture softened as he suddenly felt the fear and homesickness of the younger delegates around him. The Zephyrians' chiming became more harmonious as they experienced the protective love that drove the Ursani warriors. The Manthari stopped their aggressive clicking as they felt the desperate loneliness of species that had lost their homeworlds. The demonstration lasted only 30 seconds, but in that time, the entire chamber experienced something that none of them had felt in centuries: genuine understanding. The impossible decision. When the device deactivated, the silence in the chamber was profound. Many delegates sat with expressions of shock, wonder, or confusion. Some were quietly weeping, overwhelmed by the emotional experiences they had just shared. Elder Voss spoke first, his voice soft with amazement. In all my centuries, I have never felt anything like that. To experience the fear of an enemy as if it were my own fear. Ambassador Thrak was staring at his hands, scales shifting through colors that had no names in human language. I felt their terror, he said quietly. When I spoke of conquest, they were terrified that their children would die. I felt it as if their children were my own. Dr. Chen waited, allowing the impact of the demonstration to settle throughout the chamber. She knew that what she was about to propose would sound impossible to beings who had known only conflict for centuries. The network is already in place, she said finally. Over the past 20 years, we've hidden quantum resonance nodes throughout the galaxy. They're disguised as communication relays, navigation beacons, and sensor arrays. Every major population center, every military base, every trade route is already connected. The chamber erupted in alarm. Several species began shouting about human treachery and secret invasions, but Dr. Chen continued calmly. The network is inactive, she said. It's been waiting for this moment, for a choice that only you can make. We can activate it galaxy-wide, or we can let you proceed with your war. The decision is yours. Commander Xel's mechanical voice was filled with suspicion. Why should we trust you? This could be a weapon designed to control our minds. Captain Rodriguez stepped forward. Because we're going to be the first ones affected by it. When the network activates, humans will feel everything that every other species feels. If there's pain, we'll share it. If there's fear, we'll experience it. If there's death. He paused, looking around the chamber. We'll feel every life that ends as if it were our own. Elder Voss floated closer to the human delegation. You're willing to experience the suffering of an entire galaxy to prevent war. Dr. Chen nodded. We've run simulations thousands of times. Once beings truly understand each other, once they feel what their enemies feel, war becomes impossible. Not because of force or fear, but because empathy is stronger than hatred. The debates that followed were intense but different from any in galactic history. Instead of arguing about territory or resources, delegates found themselves discussing the nature of consciousness, the meaning of understanding, and the possibility that war might not be inevitable after all. Ambassador Thrak was the one who finally called for a vote. His scales had settled into colors that suggested deep thought rather than aggression. 30 days, he said. Give us 30 days to consider this proposal. If we cannot find another solution, we will try humanity's neural network. Dr. Chen agreed to the timeline, though she knew that 30 days would barely be enough to prepare for what was coming. As the delegates filed out of the chamber, she caught Captain Rodriguez looking at her with concern. Are you sure about this, Sarah? He asked quietly. Once we activate the network, there's no going back. The galaxy will never be the same. Dr. Chen looked out through the chamber's massive windows at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, fleets were gathering for the largest war in galactic history. Billions of beings were preparing to die for causes they barely understood, driven by hatred for enemies they had never tried to comprehend. "No," she said finally, "I'm not sure. But I know that doing nothing guarantees the destruction of everything we care about. Sometimes the biggest risk is also the only hope." As Peacekeeper Prime settled into its night cycle, Dr. Chen began preparing for the most important 30 days in galactic history. Across the galaxy, hidden networks hummed with potential energy, waiting for the signal that would either end war forever or prove that some problems were simply too big for any solution. The countdown to humanity's greatest gamble had begun. The day everything changed. The calm before understanding. 29 days had passed since the meeting on Peacekeeper Prime. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the command center of humanity's secret facility on Luna Base, watching screens that showed the largest military buildup in galactic history. Every major species had committed their fleets to what they were calling the final resolution. In 12 hours, the greatest war the galaxy had ever seen would begin. Captain Rodriguez approached with the latest intelligence reports. His expression was grim as he handed her the datapad. "It's worse than we thought, Sarah. The Dominion Alliance has deployed planet-killer weapons. The Zephyrian Harmony is preparing to shatter entire star systems with sonic resonance. Even the peaceful Eternal Circle has activated ancient weapons that we didn't know existed." Dr. Chen studied the tactical displays with growing concern. Red dots representing military fleets covered the holographic galaxy like a disease. Each dot represented thousands of ships, millions of lives ready to die for causes that seemed increasingly meaningless as the moment of truth approached. "How many beings are we talking about?" she asked quietly. "Conservative estimate: 40 billion sentient lives directly involved in combat. Another 200 billion in support roles or potential civilian casualties." Captain Rodriguez sat down heavily in his chair. "Sarah, what if we're wrong? What if the network doesn't work on this scale? What if we activate it, and all we accomplish is making everyone suffer together?" Dr. Chen had been asking herself the same questions for weeks. The small-scale tests had been successful, but they had never attempted anything approaching galaxy-wide activation. The quantum neural resonance technology was based on solid science, but so many variables remained unknown. Dr. Marcus Webb, the project's lead engineer, looked up from his monitoring station. "Final systems check complete," he announced. "All nodes are showing green across the galaxy. We have 97% coverage of inhabited systems and 100% coverage of military staging areas." The achievement was staggering. For 20 years, teams of human engineers and scientists had worked in secret, placing quantum resonance nodes throughout the galaxy. They had disguised the devices as routine maintenance equipment, communication upgrades, and navigation improvements. Not a single alien species had suspected that their infrastructure was being quietly modified to support humanity's greatest experiment. Dr. Chen walked to the main control console and placed her hand on the activation switch. One touch would send a signal across the galaxy, linking the consciousness of every sentient being within range of the network. Enemies would feel each other's emotions, warriors would experience their victims' terror, and leaders would share the grief of those they had ordered into battle. "Final status report," she called out. "Zephyrian 7th Fleet, 2 million ships strong, preparing to engage Dominion forces at the Nexus sector," reported Lieutenant Maya Peddle from the intelligence station. "Ursani war clans have surrounded the Mantheri home system. First wave attacks begin in 6 hours," added Ensign James Kim. "The Syntheri Collective has activated their logic virus weapons. They're planning to disable organic ship systems before the main assault." Dr. Webb's voice was tense with the weight of what they were witnessing. Dr. Chen looked around the command center at the faces of her team. These people had dedicated their lives to a dream that most of the galaxy considered impossible. They had worked in secrecy, sacrificed personal relationships, and risked everything on the belief that understanding was more powerful than weapons. The moment of truth. Elder Voss's voice crackled through the communication system from Peacekeeper Prime. Dr. Chen, the deadline has arrived. The first engagement between Dominion and Zephyrian forces will begin in 30 minutes. If you are going to activate your network, it must be now. Through the view screen, they could see Ambassador Thrak standing beside the ancient mediator. The reptilian warrior's scales were the deep red of someone preparing for battle, but his eyes showed uncertainty. Around them, delegates from other species watched with a mixture of hope and skepticism. Ambassador Thrak, Dr. Chen said, "Are you ready to experience war through the eyes of your enemies?" Thrak's 4 arms crossed over his chest in a gesture of determination. "My people have been warriors for 10,000 years, Dr. Chen. We understand pain. We understand sacrifice. If your network can show us something we have not already learned through blood, then activate it." Similar confirmations came from other delegates. Even species that had initially opposed the network were now curious enough to witness its effects. The alternative was a war that would leave the galaxy in ruins for centuries to come. Dr. Chen took a deep breath and looked one final time at the activation switch. "All stations, prepare for galaxy-wide neural harmony activation on my mark." Her finger hovered over the switch for a moment that felt like eternity. Around her, the command center was silent except for the humming of computers and the distant sounds of life support systems. In that silence, she thought about her daughter back on Earth, about the billions of families across the galaxy who were about to discover whether understanding really could conquer hatred. Activating Neural Harmony Network in 3, 2, 1. She pressed the switch. The wave of understanding. The change wasn't immediate. For several seconds, nothing seemed different. Then reports began flooding in from across the galaxy as the quantum resonance field reached critical activation levels. "Sir, we're getting reports from the Nexus sector," Lieutenant Potil announced, her voice filled with amazement. "Zephyrian and Dominion fleets they're stopping their attacks." On the main screen, tactical displays showed something that had never been seen in galactic history. 2 massive fleets, moments away from annihilating each other, were holding their positions. Ships that had been charging forward with weapons powered were now drifting motionless in space. Ambassador Thrak's voice came through the communication system, but it was different now. The aggressive confidence was gone, replaced by something that sounded almost like confusion. "Dr. Chen, I can feel them. The Zephyrian commanders, their fear is my fear. Their love for their families is as real to me as my own children." Similar reports began coming in from every sector of the galaxy. Ursani warriors, known for their berserker rage in battle, were broadcasting surrender signals to Manthari hives. The surrender wasn't from weakness, but from the sudden understanding of the terror their attacks caused in beings they had never tried to comprehend. Commander Xel of the Syntheri Collective, whose mechanical voice had always been emotionless, now spoke with what could only be described as wonder. "Impossible. I am experiencing organic emotions as if they were my own calculations. The fear, the hope, the love. How do organic beings function with such intense sensations?" Dr. Chen watched the displays with tears in her eyes. Across the galaxy, the largest military buildup in history was dissolving as warriors began to understand the beings they had been prepared to destroy. The Neural Harmony Network wasn't forcing anyone to stop fighting. It was simply allowing them to feel what their enemies felt, to understand what their victims experienced. The ripple effect. The effects spread beyond the military fleets. On planets throughout the galaxy, civilians who had lived in fear of enemy attacks were suddenly experiencing the emotions of those enemies. Zephyrian citizens felt the protective desperation that drove Dominion expansion. Manthari hive workers experienced the loneliness that made the Lumari seek connection through conquest. Elder Voss's voice carried centuries of wisdom, but also amazement that someone his age could still be surprised. "Dr. Chen, we are receiving communications from every major world. Civil unrest is ending, not through force, but through understanding. Beings who have hated each other for generations are reaching out to those they once considered enemies. Captain Rodriguez was monitoring military communications, his expression shifting from tension to something approaching joy. "Sarah, you need to hear this. It's Admiral Korath of the Dominion 12th Fleet." Admiral Korath was known throughout the galaxy as one of the most ruthless military commanders in history. His forces had conquered 17 star systems and shown no mercy to defeated enemies. But the voice that came through the speakers was nothing like the hardened warrior they expected. "This is Admiral Korath. To all Dominion forces," he said, his voice breaking with emotion. I have felt the terror of those we were about to attack. I have experienced the love they have for their children, children who are no different from our own. How can we destroy beings whose hearts beat with the same hopes and fears as ours?" One by one, military commanders across the galaxy began broadcasting similar messages. The Neural Harmony Network had created something unprecedented, a galaxy-wide moment of empathy that made warfare psychologically impossible. The new understanding. Hours passed as the effects of the network continued to spread. Dr. Chen and her team monitored the results with amazement. Not a single shot had been fired since activation. Weapon systems were being powered down, not because of orders from commanders, but because individual soldiers found themselves unable to cause suffering they could feel as their own. Ambassador Thrak appeared on the main screen from Peacekeeper Prime, but he looked like a different being entirely. His scales had shifted to colors that suggested peace and contemplation rather than aggression. Around him, delegates from every species were engaged in quiet conversations, many of them embracing beings they had considered mortal enemies just hours before. "Dr. Chen," Thrak said, "I owe your species an apology. We called you weak because you sought peace. We thought your empathy was a flaw that made you unsuited for a dangerous galaxy. We were wrong. Empathy is not weakness. It is the greatest strength any species can possess." Elder Voss floated closer to the communication pickup, his ancient features showing more animation than they had in centuries. "Dr. Chen, in all my years of mediating conflicts, I have never seen anything like this. Beings who have been enemies for generations are beginning to understand that their differences were never as great as they believed." The reports continued to flow in from across the galaxy. On the industrial world of Mechanus Prime, synthetic robots were working alongside organic beings for the first time in their history, their artificial intelligence expanded by the ability to understand organic emotions. In the Zephyrian crystal cities, the musical harmony that defined their culture was being enriched by the emotional resonances of other species. Even more remarkably, the network was beginning to evolve. The quantum neural resonance was creating connections that went beyond the original design. Species were not just feeling each other's emotions, they were beginning to understand the underlying needs and desires that drove those emotions. The galaxy transformed. Dr. Marcus Webb looked up from his monitoring stations with an expression of scientific wonder. "Sarah, you need to see this. The network is creating something we never anticipated. It's not just sharing emotions anymore. It's facilitating actual understanding. Different species are beginning to solve problems together that none of them could solve alone." The holographic displays showed examples from across the galaxy. Zephyrian harmony techniques were being combined with Manthari hive mind efficiency to create new forms of cooperative organization. Dominion military precision was being paired with Lumeri spiritual insight to develop peaceful solutions to resource conflicts. Ambassador Thrak's voice came through the communication system with a proposal that would have been unthinkable days earlier. "Dr. Chen, the Dominion Alliance wishes to formally request humanity's assistance in establishing a new form of galactic government, one based on understanding rather than conquest." Similar requests began pouring in from every major civilization. The galaxy that had been on the brink of its most devastating war was now experiencing its greatest period of cooperation in recorded history. Dr. Chen looked around the command center at her team, all of whom were watching the displays with expressions of amazement and joy. 20 years of secret work, decades of hidden preparation, and a single moment of courage had transformed the entire galaxy. Captain Rodriguez approached her with a message from Earth. "Sarah, you need to read this. It's from your daughter." The message was simple but profound. "Mom, the news feeds are showing what happened in space. The whole world is talking about it. I always knew you were working on something important, but I never imagined it was this. You didn't just end a war, you showed the galaxy how to understand each other. I'm proud to be your daughter." As Dr. Chen read the message, she felt the emotions of billions of beings across the galaxy through the neural harmony network. Joy, relief, hope, and most importantly, understanding flowed through the quantum connections like a river of light. For the first time in galactic history, the majority of sentient beings were experiencing genuine peace. The new beginning. 6 months later, Dr. Sarah Chen stood once again in the council chamber of Peacekeeper Prime. But the chamber had been transformed, just like everything else in the galaxy. Instead of separate sections for each species, the seating was integrated, allowing beings from different worlds to sit together and share their perspectives directly. Ambassador Thrak, now serving as the first Secretary General of the United Galactic Council, called the session to order. His scales displayed the calm blues and greens of contentment and purpose. This council recognizes Dr. Sarah Chen of Earth, whose vision and courage made our new age of understanding possible. The chamber erupted in applause, but it was unlike any applause in galactic history. Each species contributed their own form of appreciation. Zephyrian chiming, Ursani roaring, Manthari clicking, and dozens of other sounds that blended into a symphony of gratitude. Dr. Chen stood to address the council, feeling through the neural harmony network the emotions of every being present. Their hope, their determination to make this new age work, their commitment to never again let misunderstanding lead to war. 6 months ago, she began, this galaxy was about to tear itself apart because we couldn't understand each other. Today, we're working together to solve problems that no single species could tackle alone. The network hasn't made us all the same. It's helped us appreciate our differences while understanding our common hopes and fears. Elder Voss, now serving as the Council's advisor on historical matters, raised one of his 6 arms. "Dr. Chen, there are still those who question whether this transformation will last. Some fear that the network makes us too dependent on technology for peace." Dr. Chen smiled, the expression shared through the network with everyone present. "Elder Voss, that's exactly why the network is designed to become less necessary over time. As beings learn to understand each other naturally, the artificial assistance fades. The goal was never to control anyone, but to teach the galaxy what humans learned long ago, that empathy is not weakness, but the foundation of all genuine strength." Captain Rodriguez, now serving as Earth's military liaison to the new galactic peacekeeping force, stood to make an announcement. "The final report on the transition period is complete. Not a single act of warfare has been recorded in any monitored system for the past 90 days. Crime rates have dropped to historic lows as beings find themselves unable to harm others whose pain they can feel as their own." The chamber buzzed with quiet conversations as delegates shared their own experiences of the transformation. The Syntheri had developed new forms of artificial consciousness that could experience emotions as rich as any organic being. The Manthari had learned to value individual creativity alongside their collective efficiency. The Lumeri had found the cosmic meaning they had sought for millennia in the connections between all forms of consciousness. As the session concluded, Dr. Chen walked to the chamber's great windows and looked out at the stars. Ships from dozens of species moved through space in cooperative formations, carrying not weapons of war, but tools of exploration and construction. The galaxy that had almost destroyed itself had instead discovered its greatest treasure, the ability to truly understand one another. Ambassador Thrak joined her at the window, his presence now radiating the calm satisfaction of someone who had found purpose beyond conquest. "Dr. Chen, my people have a saying. The greatest victory is the war that never needs to be fought. Your species taught us that the greatest strength is the enemy who becomes a friend. Dr. Chen nodded, feeling through the network the contentment of billions of beings who no longer lived in fear of each other. We all taught each other, Ambassador. Humans just helped everyone remember that beneath all our differences, we're all looking for the same things: safety for our families, hope for our children, and the chance to understand our place in this vast galaxy. As Peacekeeper Prime continued its orbit through space, the neural harmony network hummed quietly in the background, no longer the dramatic intervention it had been on that first day, but now a gentle reminder of the connections that bound all conscious beings together. The galaxy had learned to understand itself, and in doing so, had discovered that its greatest enemy had always been the failure to see through another's eyes. The day humans made war impossible had become the day the galaxy learned to truly live in peace.